Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting. In another episode of the Indie Show, we are talking Sandman this way. Sandman, again tonight, we are volume 8. So we only got 2 volumes of Sandman left to go. And I got most of my usual crew with me tonight. Hopefully the last one will still make it. We got Unruly. What is going on, my friend?
I don't know, man. I'm stuck in Tennessee.
I'm sorry. We both live in backward states normally, but I think Tennessee might be worse. So
Here lately.
Yes. And we also got my man, Kavi, Comic Books NYC. What is going on, Kavi?
I am not stuck in Tennessee, but let's get stuck in the dreaming for a little while.
Yes, let's get stuck in the dreaming. So hopefully our last member will join us in a minute. But
getting towards the home stretch of Sandman.
There she is.
Speak of the devil, you can stop speaking bad about me now. Okay, I'm sorry. I could not for the life of me find my fucking headphones, so sorry about that.
Well, we are glad you made it. So we were like, we'll give her another minute and then we'll just hopefully she'll join us. So
I'm here.
I'm glad that you made it before we got started. So yes, we are in the Dreaming, Volume 8. Kavi, you were about to give your initial thoughts on this. Go ahead, man.
Was I? Oh shit. Well, I mean, I would say this is this is volume 8, and really the next 2 volumes, 9 and 10, really conclude the overall story and are very plot driven and endless and main character driven. In the way that you would expect the series to wrap up. And volume 8, World's End, kind of represents like the third and final sort of short story oriented collection. Like you had volume 3, Dream Country, right? You had volume 6, what was that? Fables and Reflections? Fables and Reflections.
Yeah, I think it's
those were short stories, and that had some of the coolest single issues, as did Dream Country for that matter. I think a lot of the cooler single issue stories are in those 2 volumes, and this is kind of the third and final of those style volumes. Probably my least favorite of those 3, because I would say I like half of these issues, and then in this World's End, and maybe I wouldn't say I dislike the other half, but I don't like the other half as much as some of the other shorter stories or kind of more standalone issues in Sandman. That said, there are some particular issues and moments in there that I really particularly love. And you have like 6 different artists on this volume. You have every single issue kind of goes back to the end. So you have Brian Talbot and Mark Buckingham, I think, doing the pencils and inks just on the in pages, right? And then you have a main featured artist for the short stories that kind of take up the bulk of each middle component of these issues. So structurally, it's set up differently because of that, as far as the creative teams and the way that they're changing within a single issue. Even like the art style will be all of a sudden drastically different for the short story versus the present quote unquote timing of being at the World's End inn or whatever. But it's Sandman, so it's a high bar, right? Like my lesser favorite Sandman is still better than 99% of the majority of comics that I've ever read. So I will say it's not one of my favorite volumes, but it's still Sandman. It's still great. Yeah. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah. Unruly. What about you? What do you think of this? What do you think of this volume? Just kind of
love it.
I knew that was going to be it. I knew it was going to be like, hey, this is my least favorite. And then I knew you were going to come in with I love it so much.
Dude, this is so, just the structure is so meta. Mm-hmm. When you dive down into it. I mean, there's some points in there where we're like 4 times removed via storytelling. It's a story about a guy telling a story about a
you had in like the Claraments one, the one with like the story about the people who dispose of the dead and all that. I feel like there was like 5 short stories within that one short story.
You get a little bit lost.
You do kind of you can get a little bit lost a little bit, especially remembering like 6 or 7 of these different character names that kind of just get thrown at you all of a sudden in that issue, but it's still cool.
Yeah.
I greatly enjoy this art.
Yeah. Okay. Jennifer, what about you? What do you think of this volume as a whole?
You know, I feel like the entire time rereading this, because this is definitely one that I like haven't that I remember the least, and I think for very specific reasons, because it is so removed from the overall storyline.
Yeah.
However, there are moments in this that I specifically remember impacting me, and the story of the oh my goodness, like the Undertaker, and he's talking about those rites, and he's talking about the sky burial. Like, my heart just dropped from thinking about how much that particular like story impacted me. And I think there were moments in this book, rereading it, where I'm like, if I was reading this in single issues, would I have dropped this series? Like, I thought that while reading this. However, there were moments like that that just completely brought me back to it, where I'm like, this is why I love Sandman so much. And even though it does feature our main cast so little, and they just kind of like come in, I do think, yeah, I do think that that like that's the point, right? Because the story is the story, in the way that in these stories the city is the character, or the city is the person. The stories are the stories, and it's being told from that story's point of view. Am I saying story too much?
Yeah.
So yeah, there were moments where I'm like, did we need to do this? Would I have loved reading this in single issues? And the answer would probably be no, because after like 4 or 5 months of this, I'd be like, I'll wait for the trade. But I do. The good thing is I get to read it in trade, and I get to read it all at once. And it was a good one for sure.
Okay, for me, I think I'm more on the Jennifer and Kavi camp than the Unruly camp. For me, I found.
Oh, see, I felt like I was still in the like. I loved it.
Yeah.
But okay.
Well, you said you were kind of in between the two. Maybe,
okay.
But yeah.
Okay. That's fair.
It's really hard with like Neil Gaiman, as I was kind of saying a little bit earlier. Like, it's a sliding scale of excellence. You know, it's like you know, we're covering it single volume by single volume, so I tend to go towards, I didn't like this as much as this one or whatever, but like as a whole, it fits in, I think.
Yeah. For me, I just found these, like, the other two volumes that are like the side single off stories and stuff are some of my favorite things about the whole run. To this point, this one is not. None of these grabbed me and engaged me at the level that some of those others did before. They were not bad. Like I said, they're not bad. It's Neil Gaiman, it's Sandman. It's like, it's a high bar. They just didn't. This volume didn't, like, the individual stories didn't grab me at the level that some of the ones did before, like have previously. And some of them just were like, I got to the end and I was like, okay, you know. But there were still like Jennifer said, still moments within almost all of them, I think, that were like really compelling and really excellently told. It just, as a volume as a whole, I was just kind of like, And then I have feelings about the end of the volume that we'll discuss when we get there. But yeah, so let's dig into this. It starts with these co-workers driving across country and driving through the night, trying to get to Chicago.
So we're talking about A Tale of Two Cities also, right?
I don't know, what, 51? Yeah, that's one.
Yeah.
Yes. They're driving through the night, trying to go to Chicago, and they get in a freak snowstorm in June in the middle of the night, and then some crazy creature on the road, and they crash, and they find their way to the end at World's End. The end at World's End. So what did you guys think just of the setup?
Well, at first to them, I guess it's just some mysterious end, right? Like,
yeah. So, they're both injured. Like, she's basically dying. He's been hit on the head. He's probably got a concussion and everything else. Because he doesn't even, like, react when he walks into this bar. And there's, like, people dressed in old-timey thing and a centaur walking around. And, like,
he's like, oh, this is normal.
Which is, like, the best.
Yeah. So,
centaur.
What did you guys think? I'll let Unruly go first here. of just the setup here to what we're going to get, like to the stories and this inn and how these people get here.
I'm a sucker for this kind of stuff, man. It's amazing nowadays. There's such a glut of fantasy period and good fantasy literature out there. When I was a kid, it was like Lord of the Rings and a handful others, and that was it. So I've always got a special place for. To me, this is excellent, and I love the thought of being caught in a reality storm and winding up at this inn. Personally, I might stick around for a few centuries.
Is the phrase reality storm disclosed in this issue though, or is that later? Like I don't remember. I've read it multiple times, so I don't remember, to be honest.
I'm trying to remember when they tell him that.
I think they just call it a storm.
I think that they do.
They just call it a regular storm at the beginning, right?
I believe that they do. I know that they like mention it in the later, and they specifically mentioned Star Trek. They're like reality storm. That's
it's right here.
Star Trek.
Yeah, no, it's right off the bat because he's still like bleeding from the head and all confused. He's like, easy there, you're caught in the storm. He's like, the snowstorm, yes, and she's like, it's not a snowstorm, friend. It's a reality storm. So yeah, it's right off the bat.
The hostess lady?
No, not the hostess, and another elf-looking person.
Was that Cluricon?
No, it's Cluricon's talking to him, but there's one in the background that I don't think actually tells a story. Like it's this character behind him. Like he's talking to Cluricon, and it's a different character behind him that I don't think actually tells a story. So
I mean, I know it's not related to specifically what we're talking about, but some of those scenes in the end, I think I had a little bit of trouble keeping track of like who said what thing.
Yeah,
more so than the art in the short story sections. Even though some of the short story sections I think were more effective than others as far as dialogue and text layout versus the art style. Like this issue takes a drastically different art style for its story, which I think it's probably the art style that stands out the most. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of one that's more.
No, it's bold. Very different. Yeah,
that's more different or bold. Who did it was Alex Stevens.
Alex Stevens.
Yeah, Alex Stevens. So he did the Tale of Two Cities short story artwork. Like he uses a lot of Zipatone in there, I noticed, which is kind of cool. I love the use of Zipatone.
Well, yeah, and it's all a very like
art. Yeah,
text and panels, and it's very.
I like how Dream looks in that style also. Right there.
Oh, when he appears?
Yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, I wasn't commenting on the story, but like the artwork.
Well, we'll get there, but we get the setup, and unless anybody has anything else to say about the setup here that we get of the end before we get into the story, we can jump into.
I thought the setup was okay. It was mysterious. I mean, it's really hard to remember what I felt about it the first time reading it, but I thought it was all right.
I think like the point of it though is that we're not given very much information about the inn, but just enough to like set our readers and be like, okay, obviously the two main characters are in this like weird situation, and find out more.
Or to give an idea how this whole volume is going to go with the telling a story format at the bar. But
as with any Neil Gaiman story, like we're literally living in his world, right? Like we're just here to exist in it. So he's going to take us wherever the hell he wants to go. For
sure. So let's talk about this. Our first story here, A Tale of Two Cities, which he even acknowledges, in deference to another longer story, but so Jennifer, I'll let you go first this time. What did you think about this Tale of Two Cities story? This guy who gets lost in a city that is his city, but it's not his city, and he has to try to find his way out. What did you think of this one?
This may be an unpopular opinion. I felt like this story could have been half the size. Like to me, there were moments where it felt like it went on too long and was one of the initial dips for me. And combined with the very minimalist artwork, I think that this was probably one of my least favorite issues of this particular volume, and maybe the like series as a whole. I think it did what it needed to do, but I just wasn't grabbed by it the way that I was grabbed by some of the other stories. But I'm here, like I'm gonna keep reading.
Yeah. Unruly, what about you? What did you think of this one?
Yeah, I would agree. This is probably my least favorite of the stories, but I really like Alex Stevens' art. I don't know if y'all remember, but in the late 80s, early 90s, DC had this imprint called Piranha Press.
Oh, jeez.
And it was where they were throwing out, and it was mainly graphic novels. I think they did 1 or 2 comic series, but it was mainly, far from mainstream comics. And this cat put out a couple of graphic novels that I have. And I remember reading an interview with him where he was trying to go for woodcut, the old woodcut look.
That makes a lot of sense with this.
Yeah.
And he said he even did a few comics with strictly from woodcuts, but it takes like, a month to do a page.
Yeah.
So I really like the art, but I have to agree this is one of the weaker stories within the story. But I love the setup of the end. I love it. And I like how the end just keeps getting more and more crowded as we go along.
Yeah. I will say, I do feel like, though, that this, because I agree it's one of the weaker ones, I do feel like it sort of, like, set the tone for the whole volume a little bit lower for me, like, because it was like the first one right out the gate wasn't great, and it was like, okay. And I think it took me a while to like get as interested in some of the other ones because the first one wasn't as good. That's just me wondering about it.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, I know we're going to be talking about them, but so many of the other stories are very, very wordy. Like, I know Neil Gaiman can be pretty wordy, but a lot of the other issues in the stories, because they're so self-contained, they need to be explained very, very quickly. But it ends up being a lot.
I mean, yeah, you're getting like paragraphs in this one.
Yeah. So I do think that I wish that they could have been, some of these could have been shorter. We'll talk about some of those a little bit later, but
okay, Javi, what about you? What did you think of this one?
Yeah, pretty much in alignment with all you guys. I would say it was my second least favorite issue. I did not enjoy Cluracan's Tale at all, really, which is the next issue.
Yeah.
To me, Cluracan's Tale is the weakest issue, but the artwork, like Unruly was saying, like I was talking about earlier, the artwork is so interesting to me in the short story component that I think it kind of salvaged the issue for me in a different way, where like, especially going back and re-experiencing it, I focused more on the artwork, I think, in my experience than the story. I thought the Tale of Two Cities story or itself, like I usually can find some sort of lesson or like real, deep insight or whatever in a lot of these gaming things. I was trying to grasp at that in this short story, but it didn't quite, like, it just didn't quite land with me, the short story itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it was very, I don't know. There was just something about this one that didn't work for me. So,
well, but the ending, I really did. The ending was a classic semi-horror tale ending where the cat's living all alone in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And, I'm not worried, and it's beautiful language. I'm not worried about I do not fear cities sleeping stretched out unconscious around the rivers and estuaries like cats in the moonlight. Sleeping cities are tame and harmless things. What I fear is that one day they're going to wake up.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't get a ton from that. I don't know why. I don't either.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe because I live in a city that doesn't sleep,
See, a lot of these stories, I imagine Neil Gaiman came up because he was driving across America. That's how I imagine he wrote American Gods. And so, like, once again, so much of this just always ties back to American Gods in one story in particular. But I just imagine this is where Neil Gaiman got that, like, the city the city is a character. The city is alive. I don't know. I dig that. Can I also like, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm like in a mood, but can I just acknowledge this person's comment that says Gaiman is woke and broke? Like, my dude, we're on volume fucking 8 of a Neil Gaiman book. We all bought it. He's not broke. We're giving him all of our fucking money, dude.
I kind of understand woke, but I can't understand broke.
Yeah, he's not broke.
He's not broke, man. He's not broke. We're giving him all of our money.
Netflix signed him up for season 2.
Yeah.
He's not broke.
I have Netflix money now.
So yeah. Amber Clark, yes. So all right. Next volume is we get a little more again of the end at the beginning, a little more of him starting to figure out what the end really is, and we get Clarion's story, who we've met before. Is he basically his sister was a gift to Sandman like previously, and we've seen him before.
Yeah.
So Kavi,
he's a repeat. He's a repeat character essentially. I forget which volume that was. Was it 6, 5?
No, it was early because it was the whole thing with who would get to own hell and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Who would get the key to hell? So yeah. So
yeah, he and his sister were part of the fairy delegation.
Yeah, the fairy delegation. So
right.
That volume
Nuala is
4 maybe
dreaming currently,
yeah.
Or is she still in the dreaming? Or
yeah, she's still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you didn't like this one, Kavi. So what about this one?
To be honest with you, I feel like I don't remember as much about this story as I do all the other ones. Like every single other one, every time I've read it, I've walked away and I could kind of summarize it. Cluracan's Tale, I can't seem to summarize for the life of me when I finish it. Like there's this weird kingdom. There are these titles that I don't even know what these titles are.
Right.
Nor the explanation of how these two titles were combined into one position, and this guy was like circumventing the process. Maybe he killed somebody. I don't know. I don't know. I just didn't follow it as much. But to be honest with you, I think more so than that, for me, it's my least favorite artwork of the issues.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. What was his name? John Watkiss. So he's probably the artist in this volume or in this whole Sandman series where I'm like probably the least familiar with their work. So I don't know the other stuff that this artist has done necessarily. Maybe I haven't been exposed to much of their other work, but there's just something about, and this is just the art in the short story, the first 2 pages in the inn and the last two pages or 1 or 2 pages, those are from, the inn artist, Brian Talbot, but the middle section is all John Watkiss. And there's just something, maybe it's the coloring and not necessarily the line work either, but there's the combination of the coloring and line work I wasn't as big on in this.
I think especially, you're right, especially for telling a story that's supposed to be set in the fairy kingdom, that's so bold, I guess.
It's very convoluted feeling to me. Like I didn't quite connect with the arc of that story either. Yeah.
I think the thing about like Neil Gaiman though is that, to me, like, he's so smart, he's so intelligent, he's telling a really good story, and this probably could have been a really good story if it was an entire arc, but instead it's like this, condensed 8-9 pages. So but I don't think that maybe at the time Neil Gaiman could have been like, there's an elf dude and there's another elf dude and he's got to go to another kingdom, and like that's where I think Neil Gaiman maybe didn't trust the reader enough to be like, let me just tell you a simple ass story and like you get to go with it. Instead, I've got to like over explain it to you. That's a little bit what it felt like. But I agree. This little story I remember the least, with the exception of
look at the bubbles.
Oh yeah,
like
so many.
Yeah.
The part that I remember the most is I do remember Dream coming in, and maybe that's just because it's Sandman. He's the main fucking character of this.
Mhm.
So he's going to be there. And that's what I remember mostly.
Yeah, I mean, and then you get like he's explaining what he's doing at the end. I mean, those are just like yeah.
Mhm.
And really, what do you think about this one? Because you love this volume. What do you think about this one?
I agree that this art didn't exactly jump off the page at me, but I love the story. I love the old medieval view of the Fae instead of our Americanized Disney version. They're
Right.
They're capricious. You know, they're selfish. They live forever. And you know they have no souls and seem to be proud of the fact.
Yeah.
And I loved how him going back like 1,300 years later, and they're ready for him this time. They might not remember him specifically, but they know what to do with those meddling freaking fairies.
Yeah.
And I love how Dream, even though he's evolved, we've all remarked on how he's evolved as far as caring about the world and those around him. And he's still telling this dude, look, man, your sister's a decent servant. I got tired of her yeah at me. That's the only reason I'm here. You know, and he frees him. And then this cat goes out and spends all night riling up the citizenry against the Carnifex. And the ending was perfect.
I like the ending. I like this page probably more than any other page in the issue, especially that top panel, like where basically he's like, this is only a half truth. Like, I mean, that's a shortened version of it, but you know, the hostess asks him, like, was that the truth? And then this is my favorite line. He says, all of it except the sword fight with the palace guard, which I threw in to add verisimilitude, excitement, and local color to an otherwise bald and insipid narrative.
Well, he starts out.
I was like, you agree with me about the story.
He prefaces his tale by saying, you know, this is nothing. It's local politics.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, this is not the greatest story in the world.
Yeah,
It's just a tribute.
and I do feel like, and I think this is like these first two, like you said, just neither one of them really grabbed me in any way. Like, I didn't find Clarion himself as a very compelling character. He's kind of just, you know, and like you said, he's talking about that his story isn't that good. It's just like these first two, I'm like, okay, like I think they just dampened the whole rest of the volume for me a little bit. And then, you know, and they're all asking him questions, and he's like, enough. I will be questioned no further. That was my tale. You know, it's just, I don't know that. I would agree with Kyle. That one was not. These first two both, I think, just set up maybe a poor tone for the whole volume that affected the rest of the volume. Because I do think some of the other ones are better, but yeah, I just never was engaged with him as a character, and like if he's kind of doing his queen's bidding, but he's kind of just not very good at his job. It doesn't seem like, and then yeah. Okay. Anything else on Clarion before we move on to what we got? We got who's next?
Hob Gadling returns.
What?
I said Hob Gadling returns.
Yes, we get Hob.
I mean, you gotta at least perk up, you know, when that happens, right?
Definitely. I will admit, it took me a minute to realize that's who that was.
Oh, okay. Well, first time through, they don't make it like painfully obvious, but yeah, and you have to. You know, you have to have such a strong impression of that character from the previous volumes that you're going to remember him on the page without being reminded, kind of thing. But,
well, and I did, but it took me a minute.
Yeah, I mean, eventually he says his name, and
well, yeah, at the end he does. I realized it before then, but it did take me a few. I was a little ways into the story before I realized. Oh wait, this is Hob. so I don't remember whose turn it is this time to talk first.
It's you.
Think about this one.
It's you.
Oh, you go first this time.
Oh, I'm first? Oh, okay.
Well, you're always last. Go first.
Well, I usually just let everybody else talk because I like to hear their opinions. This one works a little bit better for me, but the whole thing, the twist at the end with Jim, I feel like is too standard for Gaiman. Is that the wrong way to put it? It was like, oh wait, maybe that was a surprise for me, is the fact that he went down a road that I feel like it's been told a lot. That this was a very a very standard version of the story, other than we get obviously Hob, which is a character we know. But in terms of Jim's tale, that it's very. I feel like this is a very standard. Oh, I was on ships and bounced around and had to keep moving from ship to ship because they didn't want to be found out. And like, which it's not, you don't get until you get to the end, obviously. But it was pretty clear early on that's where the story was going to me. So I did feel like this was a little bit typical. Obviously, the Indian and a Hob bring a little bit of color to it, but overall, I thought, like, again, I didn't love this one. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it because I felt.
What about the Michael Zulli artwork, though? I mean, it's beautiful to me, especially during
the best artwork
during like the Indian flashback and the giant sea snake monster thing.
Giant sea monster.
Yeah, I mean, and like these kind of like just images in between panels and stuff like that. So like I would say art-wise, this is my favorite of this volume personally.
Okay.
Rising Tide lifts all ships in this case, and the artwork I think lifted the ship that was the writing. But yeah,
the artwork shines in here for sure.
I would pay a pretty penny for that double page spread.
I know, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So would the original comic art market, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that one would go for a penny or two.
I would imagine whoever snapped that up, it's never left their hands.
Yeah. I hope it's still in Michael Zulli's hand, to be honest.
Yeah.
Possible. I haven't looked specifically for it.
Better him than some other art collector, then you might get it. You might still have a shot at it. So
I would just like to point out to our audience that I am ashamed of the three of you with the lack of magic in your souls.
I like this issue.
It's not always about, the destination. The journey is what makes the story so good.
Like a journey on a ship.
I know. I'm focusing. I focused on the artwork with my brief comments so far on this issue, but this is my second favorite issue overall in this volume. So like Unruly, like I actually like this story too, not just the artwork.
I will say,
for the most part.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're thinking about the different stories, I actually like this one better than. It's probably toward the top, but I just felt like it was very standard in a way that I don't expect from Gaiman, I guess. And so, but I'll stop talking. Unruly, go. Why do you love this story? Because it sounds like you do love this story.
Have y'all ever been in the middle of the ocean for weeks or months at a time? It's awesome.
No,
it is
awesome. Frightening. That sounds so frightening.
Well, I've never did it on an old sailing ship. I've only ever done it on giant aircraft carriers, so I've got a different perspective. But it's so cool to just, in any direction you look, there's nothing but water and sky. People can fall in love with that because there's a lot of things about being at sea that just suck donkey.
Yeah.
But it's, those moments are worth it. Like seeing fluorescent algae at night in the wake of the ship or the prow kicking it up. Yeah. That's cool. And you hit shoals of flying fish all the time, especially in the Pacific.
I love that scene where they got all the fish. Like, that was cool.
And I've never seen a tornado nor been close to one, but I've seen dozens of waterfowls.
Yeah. Very cool. So is it?
I mean, story-wise, I like the peek into sort of more of Hob Gadling, but specifically sort of how he transitions from one life to the next. Yeah. And meaning he always has to pretend that his great uncle, who's currently in charge of the company, and then he rebrands himself. He probably gets a haircut, maybe shaves. I don't know what he does.
I don't know. Disguises seemed so much easier back then. Like you just had to put on a mustache and a hat, and you're good.
To hear that kind of practicality of the process. He's the owner of the ship now, but once it lands, he's got to let people know that he's died and he's been. And now he's a descendant or whatever.
Now he's the owner of the ship.
Now he's I thought that was kind of charming, kind of funny to see, and I liked that sort of. I don't know. I liked that the connection that did the Indian guy ever have a name? No, right? I don't think so.
No, because of course not.
No, right? Damn it. Well, the Indian guy, I like the the fact that the Indian guy and Hobb could relate on that level of like, they're both immortal, not immortal, eternal. I don't even know how to explain it. Yeah, I think
Long lived.
long lived. Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was cool because he doesn't have many people he can sort of connect with at that same exact experience, right?
Right.
So I thought that was
Okay.
cool.
And
For me,
the Indian guy, there's no doubt he knew exactly what ship he was stowing away on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, he was the king, right? He was the king in the story that
the king
that got the immortality that was, through the roundabout way that he essentially gave it away. Then that person gave it away, and that person gave it away, and then it came back to him, right?
Yeah.
And in there was like, his wife was cheating on him or whatever. But yeah, thought it was cool.
Yeah,
for me, all of these stories, like I feel like there's like here, and the moral of the story was this, and maybe it's just what I took away from this story, is there's this moment where after they see the big sea serpent, Hobbs tells Jim or Margaret, whatever
Margaret, yeah,
Peggy,
Peggy.
Peggy, her name was, whatever they end up going by. He says something along the lines of, because she says, why hasn't everyone told people about these sea serpents? I'm going to go and tell every single person about this story, about this fantastical thing that we saw. And he basically says to her, like, oh, what makes you think that like people will listen, or like you should do that, but don't you think that's already been done? And so I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I feel like it's like the moral of the story is that stories are what you make of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just really loved that little moment where like they got to connect, and I thought that was very special. So I liked that.
Well, yeah, she asked him at the end, how old are you, sir? And he's like, old enough to learn to keep my mouth shut and play great sea snakes.
Yeah.
So.
Adorable, right?
Yeah.
He's like, keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody.
Well, it's not even really like that. It's more of, he's like, nobody tells anybody because you don't want, why would you want the attention? Like, yeah. So nobody's going to believe you. They're going to question you. You're going to draw attention that you don't want, which is, what he says when the reveal that Jim's actually a girl, and which was not super hidden, but yeah.
Shocking. Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah. But. So, but it was, I don't know. So I'm glad you guys got enjoyed. I liked seeing Hobb again for sure, but otherwise it was just kind of for me. So obviously on the game and Sandman scale, not on the
yeah, we get it.
real comic scale. So and really sending him to a different book. So all right. So next we get Prez. What
hashtag Boss Smiley.
Hashtag Boss Smiley. What do we think of Prez? Kavi, I'll let you
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how widely known this character is, but it's an existing character that Gaiman. Yeah, so it was a DC Comics title like in the 70s, Bronze Age. I think Joe Simon had something to do with it, if I'm not mistaken.
That actually makes a lot of more sense now.
Yeah, so
and then there was like a new iteration when DC was doing their with Gerard Way. They did like a new Prez, and that one was pretty good too.
Cool. I didn't check that out. That actually sounds fun. Yeah,
I didn't know about that either.
Yeah, well, there's I don't know how many issues, but it's I think the first title came out in the Bronze Age, and it's called Prez, the First Teenage President, or something like that.
Yeah. I that's when I read it, and it was like I want to say 3 to 6 issues somewhere in there, and I loved it as a kid. Loved Prez.
Yeah, like I know I've flipped through at least one of them, like in a long box or something, but I never actually read the Bronze Age book.
The art wasn't great, and I'm sure if I went back and read it now, it would not impress me. But as a 10, 11-year-old, I ate it up.
But anyway,
and as a kid, you're like, oh, that could be me. I could be the youngest president.
I like this one though. I'm a big fan of Mike Allred's
Michael
art.
Allred,
So,
yeah.
like Sandman, his Sandman stuff, his Silver Surfer stuff. Big fan of it. So really enjoyed the short story part of this one quite a bit from an artwork perspective with his stuff. I already kind of made a joke about it with Boss Smiley. Hey Loki.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Aw.
There you go. Attention.
Boss Smiley is kind of a mysterious antagonist in a way, for this character. This character has kind of like the idealism of politics written into him or built into him of like, there's no way any politician could be this good or effective in reality. Right. And I think I don't know if that's what Joe Simon was going for, because I never ever actually read that title, but this at least is what Neil Gaiman was going for in pulling him in, right, to here.
Right.
So yeah, I actually quite enjoyed this one. I like the cameos in it. You've got like Richard Nixon, Jim Belushi, and like other cameos in there.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fun issue. It's the only short story that was only told outside of the inn, right? Like, or not in.
No, it was just
outside of the bar, outside of
Yeah.
the main room, like
Yeah.
not in front of the rest of the.
It was in the library or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that also kind of set it apart. Am I missing something? There was that whole assassination attempt or thing where they kind of paralleled the Reagan assassination attempt with
the crazy person and
because that guy was obsessed with Jodie Foster and this guy's obsessed with like some other celebrity or whatever within I think it was a DC Comics hero or something.
Was it she was obsessed with Wildcat or
Wildcat? Yeah, Wildcat.
Because that's how they meet. Yeah.
But that was cool. I mean, it was a long one, right? Like, was this like a double sized compared to the other ones? Because I feel like it's longer, but I
think just
maybe it's just
it
more text.
I think also because it didn't it didn't rely too much on like the inn, like you said. Like it was more contained in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, it had less of the end because you only get at the end of it, you only get a half a page of the end.
Right.
As the wrap up, and the beginning was very.
Does that Asian character ever get a name that's telling this story or no?
No, but I loved how he preferenced it. So
no names for Indians or Asians in this universe.
When he's setting up the story.
How woke are you now, Neil Gaiman?
So when he asked him who was president, he goes, Jimmy Carter. Oh, you come from one of those Americas.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it was before Bush, right? Or before Reagan.
He was backing up, and he's like, yeah.
Yeah, it was Clinton was the current president at the time, right?
Yeah, so. Clinton, before him, George Bush, before him, Reagan, and it's like Jimmy Carter. Oh, you come from one of those. Yeah,
Carter might be the closest parallel to Prez. You know
right.
what I'm saying? Carter there's no doubt he was a genuinely decent human being. And politics just really isn't made for genuinely decent human beings.
To be fair, the bar is really low for politicians.
True.
So. Right. But part of the reason he was ineffective was he was sort of naive and positive and like I'm gonna do good, and then reality hit and he didn't really, unlike Prez, he didn't accomplish anything. He didn't get stuff done. He couldn't get stuff done. So there is an interesting parallel there. You were correct.
The whole watch thing with like his hometown and the clocks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the cool, like it was like a metaphor in a way, but it also was like a literal gift, that he transitioned or he passed on to Dream, right? Or he gave Dream.
He gave Dream, yes.
Yeah.
I think it's because the early founders of our nation, or the early presidents, they were deists, and they thought of God as the clock maker, the watchmaker. Mm-hmm. And so I loved that part of this where it goes a little bit into that symbolism. Like if you find a watch in the desert, you don't, like, you assume someone made it, right? That it didn't just spontaneously appear there. And then I loved that, like, if you see the broken watch, you try to fix it.
Yeah.
I really love that metaphor.
Yeah, me too. I liked it.
Okay. Anything else on Prez and his little issue here?
I just really want to say I freaking love Mike Allred's artwork. I think
So
it's
good.
fantastic. I think that this was one of the next one is my favorite, but I really just I loved this story, and I think it's because of the artwork. It also maybe because of that like universe that's shaped by politics, it reminded me of Watchmen, and not in a bad way. So I enjoyed this.
Also,
You could
Bob
draw a
Smiley is kind of Watchmen-y with the whole
Yeah.
comedian thing. So
What were
And you
saying
could draw
about-
a parallel between Prez and Dr. Manhattan. If you recall his backstory,
Uh-huh.
with
Yeah.
repairing watches.
Okay. So next, I don't remember who. Is it Unruly or is it Kavi's turn? I forget. think
I
it's
went
Unruly.
first on Prez, I think.
Well,
so.
actually, Jennifer says the next issue is her favorite, so
Yeah,
we'll let her go
favorite.
first.
Yeah, let her go.
Okay. So I really like this one, and it's probably pretty gosh darn obvious. I know I talked a little bit earlier where the story of the I don't even remember what you'd call him. I just want to call him like Crypt Keeper or I don't know.
Leproth is the one that is the older one, and the one telling the story though is
The
Petrifax,
younger-
right? Or-
Yeah.
Petrifax. Yes, Petrifax.
He's the apprentice, right? Or
The
apprentice.
apprentice. Yeah, and so they're basically undertakers, but like they're very
Well,
like
yeah, it wasn't necessarily defined as a specific word. Like you were kind of just left to your own.
I mean, in our world, they're
In our
what we
world,
call
yeah.
undertakers or whatever. But yeah.
Right, but I don't think they're actually alive or they're actually dead. Like I feel like they're in some sort of limbo period, but they've been given the responsibility of transitioning people over to, or getting rid of
in their physical
physical
state from their-
remains.
Yeah.
Transitioning them to,
Yeah.
you know.
But
So-
they age, so I mean, you see the
And
one
they-
lady.
Mhm.
I know, but
Well,
look at the guy's
died.
face. Like, is that guy just alive and that old, or is he some sort of like dead,
Yeah,
dead yet alive thing? Like
Yeah.
a zombie of some kind, or I don't know.
yeah, they're definitely interesting
They
because
left
it's not
that-
real
that
sure what
open a
they
little
are really.
Yeah.
Well, I really liked this particular issue because I felt like even though there was a lot going on in this one, it was really wordy. But it, of course, because it reminded me of like the code horror stuff. Like this to me was just right.
I mean,
Sprinkle
So-
a little dead sauce on there. Sprinkle a little dead sauce on that steak.
yeah.
This definitely reminded me of that like House of Secrets vibe, which
Mhm.
y'all know that I love. So I think that this was a really good issue. And the part that was just so impactful for me was him talking about the sky burial ritual. And I want to shout it out because I love it so much because he talks about it. He says there's only going to be 3 things left whenever the body's gone. Like 1, it's going to be our pride in it. 2, like our memories of his departure, and then the 3rd thing, the stain on the rocks, which just go away. And I don't know why, but that tripped me out. I love that. I love that so much. So if it didn't look like House of Secrets like code horror to me, if it didn't have that like weird ass metaphor, I probably would have not liked this issue for being so wordy, but those things did it for me.
Okay. Kavi, what did you think about this one?
I would rank it in the middle of the. What were there? 5 issues in this? I mean, the first two were my least favorite. I really like Prez a lot. I like World's End, which is the final issue, a lot. I think this is the one in between, right? So.
Well, no, there's 6 because the first
6?
2, and then
Which one am I
there's
missing?
the Hob.
Oh, the Hobbs. Okay, so that's
Hob,
also one of
Prez.
the ones I
Yeah,
like.
there's 6.
So I would put this in the middle to top, as opposed to, middle to bottom.
Right.
If that makes any sense at all. I like the whole. I think the stuff that Jennifer was just saying about the 5 different types of burials and sort of the meaning behind that and stuff is some of the stronger parts of the issue. I think out of the short stories within the story, because there was like 3 or 4 potential short stories in this.
Right.
One in which
The Hangman.
Yeah, one's the Hangman, which I thought that was kind of cool too. But I also enjoyed seeing Destruction pop into the
Right.
one of those.
Destruction shows up.
I mean, that's World's End, which has like the best sequence of like 5 double-page splashes in a row.
Oh,
that,
look
like,
at
Sandman
these
has.
would be the pages that I'd want if I could buy
So
a double
good.
page spread. It would
So
be this one.
But in this issue, when he shows up in that one short story or whatever, when he's talking about, he's essentially telling him how the necropolis of today that he knows is not the original necropolis, and he's kind of telling the story of the fact that it already existed and was then essentially eliminated and started all over, right?
They had to start. Destiny started it all over, and they're like,
exactly, yeah. So I thought that was some cool insight, and then you do see like the Endless show up in that short story as well, and under not the same forms you're used to seeing them or whatever.
Right.
But there is that couple panels or that one page where they show up, which was cool. It's that third story that kind of like trips me out a little bit, that I didn't quite connect with, was I guess maybe with the
with their former master or whatever.
Yeah, with like
in the room,
the room and the book, and was that, I'm assuming that was Destruction's book or something, and that he was the voice. But yeah, I don't know. I liked it, but I would. It's not my favorite, but it's not my least favorite. I guess it was like in the middle for me.
Okay. Well, I do think it has something to do with like the Endless or something, because when it says like which of them is dead or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's implied based on some stuff.
Yeah.
Previously, but.
So that one of them had died previously or whatever before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And really, what about you? What did you think of this one?
Well, what I really liked about this, and I know Gaiman just had an author's chubby going when he was writing this. We're reading a story.
I'm so sorry. I had to think for it, and I was like, an author's chubby.
I was gonna say, how's that different than?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
I know what you're saying, though. I know what you're saying.
I apologize to everyone around me for the next week who's going to have to bear with me using that phrase.
You mean another word is plot boner. Plot boner.
Oh well,
I guess it's 2 words.
Didn't expect to go here tonight, but sure.
Hey.
Gaiman's writing this story. Brant, the original driver, on their way back to Chicago, is telling this story to a bartender.
Mm.
Meanwhile, the Petrifax is telling a story about another time when they were sitting around telling stories.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. I don't know that I've ever run across a structure like that, not just in comics, but in anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's interesting to me. I mean, maybe this necropolis is that plane of existence. Maybe Death herself has set that up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
To be like a limbo.
I just everything about this issue. This is probably my favorite.
I'm high-fiving.
Wait, I don't know how to do that. I'm not on enough.
No, it's definitely, to me, it is one of the more engaging ones, just because the variety of the stories and the nature of the stories, I do think, are more engaging than some of the others for sure in this volume. It's really well done, like you said, because it is story within story within story within story, and I do think it's definitely one of the more engaging. So anything else there before we move to the last issue here?
Oh, now, as for the art, I've never heard of this cat, or Shea Anton Penzo.
Yeah, it's one of the lesser known artists, along with whoever did the second issue, which I wasn't as big on.
But now Vince Locke did the inks, and later on we'll see a story he got the pencil, which is easily the worst art of any of the stories in Sandman. But now Vince Locke drew Dead World back in the 80s, one of my all-time favorite comics. So that, you know, the art is solid. I wish I wouldn't mind seeing more from this person.
Yeah, I for the most part enjoyed the artwork in this issue. I didn't really have any complaints about it. I didn't think it stood out like Michael Zulli, or it stood out like what's his name, Alex Stevens, but it was solid to me.
Yeah. Okay, so last issue is World's End, and we get a lot of just them in the inn, and you get to see just how crowded it's become, like during the process of them being there. And we sort of get a little bit of Charlene's story, but not really. Like, she sort of refuses to tell it, and she starts to, and she then refuses. And we get a lot of them like figuring how and when they're going to get to go home. And you get this like lead in to the panel Jennifer showed a minute ago.
I mean,
and then you get what, one, was it
four? I think you get like five
page in a row. Yeah.
In a row, something
like that. We get these amazing pages.
And this one brings back like a ton of characters that you've already been introduced to all in one, which is kind of cool to see.
So yeah, you get, you're getting all of these,
including like Odin and Thor, Mr. Tenbones, and like all the characters, like Bast,
So, Kavi, you said this was your favorite issue, so I'm going to let you start and talk about this issue. So what?
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily art driven,
right?
I guess, as to why the way I rank the issues has been primarily art driven. That said, like there was a lot of endless characters in this, and that always kind of perks up my brain as far as storyline. Even though they didn't really have dialogue, it was a lot of like interpretary appearances. Not necessarily straight up dialogue character appearances by them, which is interesting. But yeah, I thought it was. I thought that sequence in particular, where they're all kind of staring out, and he basically explains how moving forward he's going to be haunted by death, basically. You know what I mean? Or obsessed.
So different artists on those pages with a different Gary Amaro. I don't know him. Gary Amaro.
Gary Amaro.
Very cool. So go ahead. Sorry, I was just looking to see who the artist was on those pages.
No, I was basically done. I mean, I think it's kind of left. It kind of wraps up in a open-ended kind of way. It's not like a let's wrap this story in a bow and like make the last 5 issues like all magically connect in some microcosm of like little Easter eggs that he laid in all 5 of those. It's not like that. It's a conclusion of what is this place, you know what I mean?
Right.
And how do these characters move forward after having visited this place, which is essentially the intersection of the ending of many, many different worlds. And it's a place where they essentially tell each other stories while they wait for that process
to shake out,
and be returned to potentially their own world, some other world, like whatever, like that's not really fully explained, but I like kind of things like that where it's like there's more, you can have interpretation in your head a little bit more about it. It's not necessarily a neatly wrapped up bow on the story or anything like that. But I mean, art wise, it's my favorite. It's favorite specific sequence. Maybe not favorite overall issue because there's like 2 or 3 different artists and different, back and forth. I think the Michael Zulli issue consistently throughout is my favorite artwork wise in this volume. But some of those double page sequences are some of the best in the whole book of Sandman. Like, period for me. So it's up there. So I would. It's like I rank it as my favorite issue in this volume, but like it's pretty close between this and the what's it called, the Prez story for me.
Okay. Jennifer, what about you? What do you think about this particular issue?
Once again, like, these spreads are just amazing. And I
Okay.
do, like you said, it didn't have to end nicely, or it didn't have to wrap up in the way that we thought it would. But I love him having the conversation with the bartender at the end and kind of talking
Mhm.
about, where do I go from here? Like, I went to this place, and in the end, this person that I was with was so real to me. And then no one knew who this person
But no one
was,
knows,
this person.
yeah.
And now no one knows. And it's just me. And isn't that just how it is? You know,
Yeah.
we're all stories in the end.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. I liked that wrap up a lot.
Okay. And Ruli, what about you? What do you think of this issue?
Yeah, I don't think he got shuttled back to quite his reality. Pretty
Exactly,
close,
yeah.
but not quite. And what I really love about it is it's Brant is telling this whole tale, and he's just an ordinary office drone, you know, in Sector 7G, just a schlub.
Right.
And he's had this incredible thing happen to him.
It's like a software.
so incredible
It's like a
that he's
software sales engineer or something, right? Like, yeah.
He's forced to blurting it out, or not blurting it out, but boring some poor bartender for a couple of hours with it. That's a fascinating story device.
Yeah. I do think, for me, like, I do enjoy the way they, like, wrap up Brant's tale and pull this all together. I don't know how I feel about these amazing double parade spreads in the middle. Having not read this story before.
In the middle or towards the end?
Where it's going, because I've very much tried to avoid, like, knowing where this is going.
Oh,
yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you
like
haven't read the next couple volumes.
Yeah,
I feel like it just told me where this is going.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know how I feel about that. Like, then I feel like, oh, we're about to read about the events that lead to this whole thing that we just read about, and I don't know. And I'll maybe feel differently once I've read the rest of it. But I feel like if I was reading this in issues, I would be upset. Like, I'm a
Because
little
then you'd
bit,
have to wait.
Well, I know the end. Do I even want to read the end at this point?
You do.
Like, you do. Yeah.
I know, but I think reading this now, I was a little bit like, well, crap. And so I don't know. So I'm not saying that the end's not worth it, but it's just like, I don't know that I needed it to be this expressly given away, like the way it is.
I guess, but I think your assumptions about what the end is right now are not necessarily in line with the intention of putting that in there right now. So
okay, well, I haven't gotten there yet. But like, as someone who hasn't read it, like, it comes across as like, well, and given
exactly. Marvel by the month. Sandman's a very journey, not the destination kind of story. So I would agree.
And the previous volume, I think, thinking back to the previous volume where that ended, and just this, I don't know. It just was like, it did put a little bit of a sour taste on this volume as a whole for me, because I felt like it's giving away and maybe like once I read the rest of it, I won't feel that way anymore. At the moment, I feel that way.
That gives you the sour taste versus the first two issues. Like, for me, that was the sour taste. Is the first two issues in comparison to the rest of the volume. But I've also read the whole thing and have reread the whole thing now, like, a bunch of times. So it's a different experience.
Right. Yeah. Entirely. And so, like I said, I'm the only one here that hasn't read the final two volumes. So.
Oh shit! Should we have said spoiler alert?
Probably, but whatever.
A long time ago. Sorry.
Well, I mean, we're
all of these are spoiler alert, understood, kind of.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm talking about this is my assumption at this point, and you guys have, like, confirmed it, but it's pretty well, if you read this volume,
right,
it's pretty obvious what's going on there. So, it's not hidden in any way, shape, or form. So, because
I was going to say, wait, what's the name of volume 10?
I don't know.
It's The Wait.
Yeah.
It is The Wait. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I hadn't even looked that far. I'll be honest. So.
Damn, you're really avoiding spoilers
Well,
on this.
because
Sorry.
partially because I bought them like this.
Oh, that's
so
true.
I
That's
don't
true.
necessarily have the volume title.
Right. There's
I
also
look 'em
those
up
like there's
basically when
also
we get ready
those
to do the show.
there's also those like one-off like volumes that came out with with some miniseries and stuff beyond, like there's Endless Nights, there's the
Yeah, I
Dream
think those are
Hunters,
in
there's
'cause
the
I
whole
have
Death Book, which is a whole other book.
Yeah, so I have
So good. Yeah.
just aside, I have this is volume 9 volume 9 finishes this book, and then volume 10 has a bunch of that other stuff in the back of it that I have. Or I shouldn't volume 10, book 5 of the deluxe edition has volume 10 and then a bunch of other stuff. And then I have the death one because I do want to read the death one with you guys.
It's so good.
So all right, well, with that, final thoughts. I think I already gave mine. And really, final thoughts on this volume.
Gaiman can do no wrong for me, pretty much. I just marvel at his imagination. But this really is cool to me because it's one of those series I turned my old man onto that he loved.
Nice.
Kavi, what about you? Final thoughts on this volume?
I mean, it's pretty similar to my opening thoughts, really. Like, it's all Sandman, so I really like it. But it's from out of the volumes that are more focused on shorter stories or less connected stories, with the exception of maybe the last one here. It's not my favorite of those volumes, so it's probably overall one of the weaker volumes for me. But at the same time, it's a little bit of a pause, like it's a little bit of a breather before, like you have to come back for the finale.
Yeah, like the next one is like 12 issues or something in the next volume or something.
Yeah. So this is issue 51 through 56, and Sandman ends with 75, I believe. So there's a lot of issues left in the final.
Well, it goes to like 69. The next volume does.
Yeah.
It's like 57 through 69 or something. So, Jennifer, final thoughts?
Yeah. So I feel like every single time we wrap up one of these, we say a lot of the things, like these things over and over again. There's parts that we love, there's parts that we don't love, or that we just outright hate. But I think reading it from the perspective, again, of like knowing what happens, know where it goes, is that it is greater than the sum of its parts, right? Like we could say like 1 + 1 + 1 = this, but really this whole series is just so damn good. And even you said it earlier, Kavi, like even the worst parts are still a damn good,
better than most comics.
So I really, even though, like I said earlier, I did say at the beginning of the show where I was like, if I had been reading this in single issues, what I have really like kept on, I probably would have. If I had not gotten this in single, not kept up in single issues, I probably would have been disappointed. And I think some of the next couple of issues, I would have been like, fuck, I took that off my pull list. Like, I need to get back into it. So.
Well, and you got to think about this. You're into the 50s at this point, and it probably would have built enough cachet that you, even though you were like, as reading it this way, you were like, oh, I don't know if I'd stay with it. But you had enough cachet at that point. You probably
it's like year 5 or ish 6 or something.
It would have taken more than a couple of issues for you to go, no, I'm not.
So true, because there have been worse issues. Like, if that had been true, I probably would have stopped at the fucking diner issue from volume 1. So I just appreciate this series so much, that even its worst parts are still really, really great. I cannot stress enough how excited I am to get into the next couple of volumes, because those are the volumes that really cement what the series ends up being. So I'm really excited. I'm envious of you, JP, for getting to read it for the first time, even though it got spoiled for you. Sorry.
Well, it didn't get spoiled for me until I read this. Like, I was not spoiled, and like reading it gave it away. Like, I guess you guys confirmed my suspicions because I haven't like skimmed ahead, but like, but Gaiman spoiled the ending for me to a certain degree, but he didn't. In fact, I don't know how we're going to get there for sure. So like, so we'll see. But yeah, and that's why I felt like a little odd about this volume, because I felt like he just told me the end, and not
necessarily the end, but
well, not.
Yeah.
He told me a big chunk of where we're going, I guess.
Sure.
And so
JP, how often do you go back and reread series, maybe of this magnitude? Like maybe not just like a 1 volume or 2 volume series, but like how often would you go back and read a series this long?
not super often. I have done it though. I mean, it's not like I've reread of the stuff I've done for the indie show at this point. The only things I've went back and reread beginning to end are East of West and Descender Ascender and what else? I'm
You're doing Black Hammer. Are you reading that for the first time as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything that I do on the show is the first time for me.
Mhm.
So, well, there's been a couple times that's not the case, but 99% has been first time for me. So, all right. Well, we are well past an hour, so I'm going to let my friends.
Night, everybody.
So, thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you in a month or so for Volume 9. So, later, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.